All right, we're given here two functions. F of x equals the square root of 7x plus 1, and g of x equals 3x plus 5. Okay, first thing we want to do is find the domain. And when we're finding domain, we see here that we have this square root. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to make sure that everything underneath the square root sign is greater than or equal to 0. And the reason why is if you have a square root of a negative number, okay, you get an imaginary number. Okay, an imaginary number. We're not going to work with imaginary numbers today. So we need to make sure that this everything underneath the root sign here is greater than or equal to 0. So we say 7x plus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, 7x is greater than or equal to negative 1. Simply subtracting 1 from both sides. Now dividing 7 both sides. Okay, this cancels out. We have x is greater than or equal to negative 1 over 7. Okay, negative 1 over 7. So we're going to say our domain is from square bracket negative 1 over 7 to positive infinity. Infinity gets the round bracket. Okay, so here's our domain. Next we want to find f times g of x. Okay, f times g of x. So f times g of x, that's simply f of x, okay, times g of x. Okay, so what do we have here? We have f of x, we have square root of 7x plus 1. So we're going to say that's square root of 7x, square root of 7x plus 1, okay, times 3x plus 5. Okay, if you want to distribute, you can distribute. I'm going to go ahead and leave it like this. Okay, next thing we could do is kind of plug in a number. So we want to find, let's say, f times g of negative 3. So f times g of negative 3. Okay, now you could kind of see that this is kind of a trick question. Okay, I don't know if you could see that this is kind of a trick question here. F times g of negative 3, because negative 3 is not in our domain. Okay, negative 3 is less than negative 1/7, so it's not in our domain. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this undefined. Okay, because if I put a negative 3 in for x, okay, I'm going to get a negative number underneath the root sign. So that's why it's not in our domain. Okay, negative 3. So if you see this, you could kind of go ahead and say that's undefined. Okay, not in the domain. Okay, what if we're going to find f of g of, let's see here. Let's do 5. F of g of 5. F times g of 5. Okay, so that's going to be square root of 7 times 5 plus 1 times 3 times 5 plus 5. See, all I'm doing is I'm plugging in 5 everywhere there's an x. Okay, so here we have our f of x times g of x. Everywhere there's an x, I'm going to put parentheses around these. Okay, and plug in the number 5. Okay, everywhere there's an x, I'm just plugging in this number 5. So what do we get here? We get 7 times 5. 7 times 5 is 35. 35 plus 1 is 36. So we get the square root of 36 times 3 times 5 is 15. 15 plus 5 gives us 20. Times 20. Okay, that equals square root of 36 gives us 6 times 20. That equals 120. So we're going to say that f times g of 5 equals 120. Okay, given our original functions. All right, let's work on another problem here. A little bit more finding the domain and then working through with some numbers, solving for x, plugging x, a number into our function. All right, so let's work with these functions. Here we have f of x equals square root of x minus 1, and g of x equals square root of 5 minus x squared. Okay, we want to find the domain. And we want to find f divided by g of x. So that's going to be f of x divided by g of x. Okay, remember that f divided by g of x is the same as f of x divided by g of x. This and this are the exact same. Okay, it's just a different way of writing it. Okay, so finding the domain, here we see that we have these root signs. Okay, so we want everything under the root sign has to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, greater than or equal to 0. Once again, we can't have a negative number underneath the square root sign. So we're going to say x minus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, comma. Also this one over here, square root of 5 minus x squared, everything underneath the radical sign. So 5 minus x squared has to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, everything underneath the root sign. So 5 minus x squared is greater than or equal to 0. So solving for the first one here, we simply add 1 to both sides. So we get x is greater than or equal to 1. Now I kind of want to point this out that we're doing division here. So we're doing f divided by g, okay, of x, or f of x divided by g of x. So if we're dividing, we can't have 0 in the denominator. It has to be greater than 0. Okay, g of x has to be greater than 0. Not greater than or equal to, but greater than. Okay, because you can't divide by 0. So we're going to change this inequality here. Instead of greater than or equal to 0, we're also going to say that it has to be just greater than 0. Okay, simply because we're dividing here. Yes, it has to be greater than or equal to 0 because underneath the root sign, but also greater than 0 because we're dividing here. Okay, so we have 5 minus x squared is greater than 0, so subtracting, we could simply add x squared to both sides, so we get 5 is greater than x squared. Okay, now taking the root of both sides, we have square root of 5 is greater than x, or x is less than the square root of 5. Okay, so we have x is greater than or equal to 1, and x is less than square root of 5. Okay, putting those kind of in our notation here. We have greater than or equal to 1, so that's going to be a square bracket. Okay, and less than square root of 5. That's going to get a round bracket. Okay, so here's our domain. All right, now let's find f divided by g of x. So that, remember, once again, that was going to be f of x divided by g of x. So f of x, we have the square root of x minus 1. G of x, we have the square root of 5 minus x squared. Okay, there you go. There's your f divided by g of x is the same as f of x divided by g of x. You could write it either way. All right. Now I guess what we could do at this point is kind of plug a number in for x and see what we get as a result. Okay, what if we had f over g of 0? Okay, is that in our domain? The answer is no. 0 is not in our domain. Okay, it has to be greater than 1. Greater than or equal to 1. 0 is less than 1. So once again, we'll say that this is undefined. Okay, once again, throwing a little trick question at you there. Can we find that? No, we can't find it. It's not in the domain. Okay, what about f over g of 2? Okay, so we plug in the number 2. Everywhere there's a x, what I recommend doing is kind of put parentheses around the x. Just the x itself. Okay, and then plug in the 2 everywhere you have this. So we're going to have square root of 2 minus 1 divided by square root of 5 minus 2 squared. Okay, square root of 2 minus 1, square root of 2 minus 1, 2 minus 1 is 1. So the square root of 1 is just 1. Okay, square root of 5 minus 2 squared, 2 squared is 4. 2 squared is 4. 5 minus 4 gives us 1. Okay, once again, 5 minus 4 gives us 1, so we have this square root of 1. Okay, 1 divided by square root of 1. Well, square root of 1 is 1, so we have 1 over 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1. So here's our answer. Alright, I hope you like this type of video. Just a short video doing function notation and finding domains. If you like these type of videos, hit the like button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to my channel for more math videos. Thank you.